right. So I was at church camp out, and I had to do a wedding, so I had to leave church camp out Saturday night. And so I'm in house today, which is fun. And since I couldn't be at church camp out, I thought I'd bring a little bit of church camp out to you. I might have looked up ways to have a indoor fire safely. Turns out, surprisingly, there are none. Also, the autofill in Google said we're calling the cops. So, yeah, that was a no-go. Hey, if you're here for the first time, this is hopefully obvious to you that we're doing something a little bit different. I am the normal pastor. I'm Brian. So I'm supposed to be here, but you don't usually have this kind of format. And so today's going to be a little bit more discussional. I'm actually using something that I used at church camp out a couple of years ago, and since you're here today, I assume you weren't there then, so I'm safe. And it'll be a little bit more discussion-driven. So if you don't like the people sitting next to you, you're not going to offend me at all if you move around and find a new group that you would like to have more discussion with. And so if you want to do that, go ahead. Feel free to move around the room. That is totally fine with me. I don't know how it will fly with them, but that's a you and them kind of conversation. So I did this at church camp out a while back. This was maybe not this past one, but the one before. And I was just starting Matthew, and I thought, well, I want to do something from the life of Jesus, but that wasn't in Matthew. And so we're still in Matthew. We have one more sermon, which will be next week in the series. That'll be 65. I feel like everybody should get like a finisher's badge or trophy, or we should have something to celebrate the fact that you made it through all 65 of those sessions. But yeah, so we're going to be in John chapter 2 this morning, and it's over time in studying this, it's become one of my favorite stories of Jesus. Early on, I think it was one of those that I didn't really understand, because turning water into wine, cool party trick. I was also at a very, very Baptist church, and so that was a little bit risque that Jesus, dabbled in some wine, whatever kind of wine it was. It seemed maybe off-brand for the Jesus that I understood him to be at the time. And so, yeah, that's a little bit different. So my first question, and this relates totally to the text, why aren't you at camp out? Literally, I got up here and vamped more than one time and told you what a great time it would be. And here you are on Sunday morning instead of at the camp out. I don't know what I've got to do to, anyway, all right. So as we think about this story, sometimes people get this story way wrong, right? Like this becomes sort of the linchpin of, can Christians drink, right? And so the one side will go, yeah, they can drink because look at what Jesus did. He made alcohol. And the one side will say, well, the word for alcohol is non-alcohol. It's the weirdest debate ever. Can Christians drink or not? We can settle that. I don't actually think this text addresses that for either side. So if you're like hanging on to this one for that point, you're going to come up, no pun intended, you're going to come up dry today. Another one is like, well, Jesus sanctifies this marriage. And does he, doesn't he? Again, I don't know that that's the point that John is making. I don't know that is why he is there, is to sanctify that marriage. We know God sanctifies all marriage, right? Marriage is from him. Marriage starts in creation. Marriage starts before there's an Israel, before there's a covenant with God. It starts before New Testament covenant, right? Marriage is around. So if you're a believer, your marriage is sanctified through Christ. But if you're not a believer, this is still God's plan. This is still God's product that you're partaking in. It's still a bridge for understanding the gospel of how does Jesus love you, right? It's one of those things that even lost people get to experience a little taste of God's grace, even if it's not as good as it can be. So there's a lot of wrong ways to understand the story, and I think our combined intelligence of this room through some discussion is going to help us get down to the deeper roots of what's really going on here. So I'm going to read the story in the entirety, and I'll have some questions, and we're going to break into discussion groups. We'll have some microphones, and I'll call you back, and you'll answer. So it's going to be different. If you don't like it, come back next Sunday, which is also going to be a different Sunday. We're going to have multi-languages, but just keep coming back, and eventually we'll get normal again, I promise. So this is John chapter 2, starting in verse 1. It says, on the third day, there was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus also was invited to the wedding with his disciples. When the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. And Jesus said to her, woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the master of the feast." And so they took it. When the master of the feast tasted the water, now become wine, he did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. The master of the feast called to the bridegroom and said, "Everyone serves the good wine first, when the people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." This is the first of his signs Jesus did at Cana in Galilee, and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there for a few days. So I want us to think about that first couple of verses, maybe verses 1 to 5. And there's kind of a cultural expectation of hospitality. The idea of food running out in a hot culture, this is the worst thing possible. This is the biggest embarrassment. In certain warm cultures, we'll call them, warm cultures being just kind of socially warm, hospitality driven. In many of these cultures, they have hospitality debt. Families will go into debt in order to, they borrow the money to buy the food, to have someone over, because the obligation for hospitality is so high. That is what they do. And so for me, being a Southerner, this is actually one of my big fears is like, I've had people over at my house and there's not enough food. We were just at camp out, as I might have mentioned, and we decided to do, have you ever had Chinese dumplings? Right, I saw this video online of somebody roasting them over the fire on marshmallow sticks. And I thought, oh my gosh, I've spent a year of my life in a tent. How have I never thought of that? And so I went to H Mart and bought, I just thought, well, 1 bag per person should probably do it. And it did, it definitely did it. It did it for us and like 4 or 5 other families around who just kind of wandered through our camp. Another great selling point for camp out. If you camp anywhere around me, I always have too much food so you can stop in and try some extra bites of stuff, right? But that's where that phobia comes from, is I can't run out. And here at this party, what happened? They ran out. They ran out of wine. And Mary comes into this. Now, John doesn't answer a lot of questions. Why is Mary there? What is her role there? Does she have an obligation? Doesn't answer for us whose wedding this is. Doesn't answer why is Jesus there. All we know is what is. So Mary's there, Jesus is there, and Mary springs to action. And she kind of puts this on Jesus, and Jesus gives a response. Okay, so I want you to take a couple people around you and chat for a few moments. His response to her seems a little off, right? How many of you call your mom woman? Any? Right? In my house, that would get, a pretty swift backhand. Probably, I assume in yours, no hands raised. So talk for a minute. What is that? What is he saying to her? What verse was that? It's verse 4. Woman, what does this have to do with me? My hour has not come. All right, take a few minutes, chat about that. I'll call you back, and I want to hear some responses. If you're sitting by yourself, move in with a group. Let me give you a hint. If you got your Bibles, look at John 19:26 and bring that into your discussion. John 19:26. That might give you a clue if you're stumped a little bit as to why he's so curt, we'll say. Could I get 2 volunteers to run microphones for us? Jeff, thank you. Oh, Steve, thank you. Okay, what do you think? What has your group surmised?
Let you speak, Mark. Yes, you.
Any takers?
Don't be shy.
Beth is over here.
Okay. Can you hear me? No? Yes?
Hold it closer.
There?
Yeah.
Can you hear through the mask? Okay. Okay. So we were talking about what does this mean and what does hospitality mean? And then it dawned on me that the story is really in 2 levels. The story is talking about Jesus' interaction with the other humans. He's part of the human experience. He's part of the family cultural experience. But it's also talking about his relationship with God. Mm-hmm. On the other level, it's like, well, he's saying, this is a path, and it's different from yours, and I have this path, but I also have this human levelness.
Yeah.
Am I making sense?
Yes, yeah. That's a good point. Good analysis.
Yeah.
Okay, Beth?
Okay, so first off, I want to know what woman word is used in this case. In the NIV, it calls her dear woman, which I love. It sounds sort of British, raise your eyebrow. Well, dear woman, whatever. And the dear woman, they translate the same thing in John 19 in the NIV. Mm-hmm. So I wondered what the...
Would you read that full verse 4, since you're reading out NIV?
Dear woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied. My time has not yet come.
Yeah, so in most of the other translations, they translate it more literally. What does this have to do with me? NIV is trying to help us understand more the sense of it. So it's not as literal, which is why it sounds a lot smoother and more polite. The woman's the word for woman. Yeah.
It's just a common.
Yeah, there's no get out of jail free card in the Greek. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we also talked about how Mary has known that her son is God since before he was born. And how many times has Mary bitten her tongue over these 30 years? And if hospitality is the major tenet of this whole cultural society, perhaps Mary is involved deeply with this family and knows this is like the biggest faux pas you could have, would be to run out of wine. And she knows her little boy grown up is God and can do everything. So like any good mama, she's going to fix the problem by going to the best source, which happens to be God, who's sitting to her left. And you would say, honey, could you just go fix this problem? Yeah. And he's trying to step back from his dear mother because he knows what's ahead. Yeah. And he has to put distance between, and you see him giving her to John or whoever the secret disciple is in that case, later to care for her. So I think it's the first step of stepping back from that small family unit because he has a bigger calling on his life.
Yeah, there certainly is an economy of motion when your son is God incarnate. I'd never thought about that from a choring standpoint. Like, hey, son, it'd be really great if these dishes wash themselves. You know, he like. Any other takers on the phrase here? Eric?
I don't know if it may be because Mary was in as need of the salvation that Christ was going to bring for everyone else. So with her prompting him to do a miracle before maybe he was ready or whatever, it's just re-clarifying, okay, this is not mother-son relationship. You're asking me to do something that's, where I'm the son of God. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah. So I don't know that I have the answer, but I would just say it's important when we don't understand something in the text that we don't interpret it based on our culture, our language, our background, right? So for me to call my mom woman would be very rude. I brought in that other verse, like this is actually how we interpret Scripture. We let Scripture help us understand how should this be interpreted. And so when we see Jesus on the cross using the same word, the same expression, we understand this is not as, that moment is a very caring moment, right? He's looking after his mom and trying to reassign. He knows that he's about to die. He's trying to reassign someone to be a caretaker for her, right? So it's not at all, as blunt as it sounds in English, and it sounds very blunt in English, it's not at all that in their culture. And even the what does this have to do with me, that's close to a very literal translation. That's all through the pages of the Old Testament. When two people are talking and they go, what does this have to do with me? They're really asking, what would you like for me to do? It's just kind of a backwards way of communicating. We do this too, right? Your kid's gone missing for some time and you can't find them and you go, if they're not dead, I'm gonna kill them, right? It's not an intent to murder. It has like a reverse effect. It's metaphor, right? So there's some of that. And what's fascinating is she doesn't need a second word back to him. She doesn't say, hey, don't sass me. Hey, no, you're going to do, like there's no argument. She just says, okay, you guys do what he says. Which is an interesting phrase, right? As evangelicals, sometimes we're afraid of Mary. Quite a few of us have come from Catholic backgrounds, or like me, I have lots of extended Catholic family. For generations, all the way back from my grandfather to France, all Catholic. And so sometimes we have this aversion to Mary, and I actually think sometimes leaning on the words of Mary can be helpful to say, no, we're not anti-Mary, we're pro-Mary. Mary says, do what Jesus says. Now, yes, that's less localized in this story, but if we just take that and apply it to the whole thing, well, what does Jesus tell us to do? Mary says, do that, obey him. We don't really need to be afraid of Mary. Okay, so starting in verse 6, there's this interesting conversation about the jars. Yes, it's water and wine, but John gives us this delicious little tidbit. They are jars that are used for the Jewish rite of purification. Okay, I want you to talk in your group. Why is this an important detail that John hands to us? That these jars are not just any jars, but they're for purification. Yep, y'all chat in groups. Okay, somebody volunteer to share an answer from your group. What's so special about these jars? What's this? Why is this in here?
The jars were used for purification, ceremonial purification, and the wine is a symbol of, will be a symbol of Jesus' sacrifice and his blood cleansing us from sin.
Very good, Holly.
Just adding on to that, we were talking about the same idea of that they had been previously using water to cleanse themselves, but he said, I came to cleanse you with blood that would be permanent. The water was temporary, but he came to do it with blood, which was permanent. Without the washing of blood, there is no forgiveness of sins. So the wine that appeared red like blood was kind of a foreshadowing of the cross and the complete purification.
I hear you, Sarah. Where are you? Oh, you perfectly blocked. Like, I hear the voice. I'm looking around the room. It's like, man, where's she hiding? Any other thoughts? Yeah, so y'all are all hitting on the essence of what's going on here. These jars, he didn't just grab any jar. I mean, John is letting us know they're stone jars and that they're used for purification. So clay jars, because they're more porous in Jewish custom, they could become ceremonially unclean. So you wouldn't use something that can be unclean for anything designed to make you clean. King Herod built amazing places all over Israel. He really beautified many elements there. He built, he beautified the temple. He built a palace out in the desert, multiple palaces in the desert. Masada, where the Jews kind of had their final last stand with the Romans, that was one of his many palaces. He has one down by the sea, Caesarea by the sea. It's like the first infinity pool on a resort kind of thing. It was amazing design. That you could have a freshwater swimming pool right at the ocean, that they were thinking this in the first century. It's amazing. So he built all of these things, and everywhere he built stuff, he built what's called a mikvah. It's a bath that you get down into, and it's for ceremonial cleansing. If you go to Jerusalem, they still have these everywhere. I mean, hundreds of them. They're just sort of littered around. And so you had different Jewish camps who would say, well, you have to, in order to baptize, right? That's what they're doing. It's not, so Christian baptism is not a new concept. It's the New Testament writers basically giving new meaning to something that the Jews had already been doing. So they would go through this ritual cleansing for any number of reasons, but especially if you're going to go to temple, especially if you were one of the ones who worked in the temple, you would have to cleanse yourself before you went in there. So ceremonial cleansing was part of the law. It was part of the process to make yourself presentable before you come to God. Now, certain sects of Judaism would say, well, you have to do this in natural water, go do it in the river. Okay, what about people who don't live by the river? Okay, well, ideally you have to use river water. You can't use this from an aqueduct or something, so you have to go draw it live and then pour it into the pool. Right? This is what legalism gives you, by the way. And so that's what they would do. They would use these stone jars for filling up. And it just looks like a little kind of jacuzzi dug down into the rock. And they would fill it up with water, and they would bathe, and they would go do whatever that they had come to do. And so Jesus is taking this, it's like the old and the new. I think you mentioned this in terms of the last question of there's kind of two elements. There's the horizontal of Jesus as man, and there's the vertical as Jesus as God, right? He's taking the horizontal the element of cleansing and washing and, you know, a party and wine and food and hospitality. But then there's this vertical of, it's before his time. Mary's saying, hey, would you do this? And he goes, wait, this might let things out before it's time for this to be let out. And then he picks up something that would have shocked everybody. I mean, imagine, I don't know, walking into like a really Orthodox church or a Catholic church, and you see the I don't know what the word is. I'm not Catholic. What's the word for, I want to say chalice or goblet, but that's probably not the word that they drink the wine out of. It is chalice, okay. Yeah, imagine someone offering a toast at a party and just reaching over onto that table and going, okay, to the bride and groom or something like, I mean, that would you just be like, whoa, wait a second, you don't do that with this. This is for something else, right? And Jesus is taking the stone jars for purification, filling them with water, so far so good, and then he turns it into wine at the party. We'll talk about why wine in a moment, but this is a baffling thing to everyone. They take it to the sommelier, the master of the feast there, and he tastes it and says, look at what you've done. So the normal pattern, and this is where if you go, well, Christians can drink or they can't drink, he's letting you know that at this point of the party, people would have been sauced enough to not tell the difference between good and bad wine, okay? So that probably implies Jesus has made the same, chemically speaking, the same kind of wine that they were already drinking. It was just better. But he's noting, hey, usually you wait until people can't tell the difference to bring out the cheap stuff just as a way of cutting costs. For those of you who've had to pay for a wedding, I'm sure cutting costs in creative ways is a thing. So here's a trick from the first century, right? Just use the heavy stuff first and then, go with the light stuff later. But he is amazed at this because it's the reverse of what he's expecting. All of a sudden he's going, where did you get this? And there's sort of this like he amongst the servants of they knew where it came from, but he didn't know where it came from. So he exclaims this in verse 10, everyone serves the good wine first, but when the people have drunk freely, then the poor wine. But you've kept the good wine until now. Now, verse 11 is fascinating. That's what we're going to talk about next. This is the first of his signs. So John uses this word sign a lot. I think probably in other gospels they might use the word miracle, but John is very big on Jesus performing signs to indicate who he is. It's the first sign that he did in Cana at Galilee, and he manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So there's four words there, signs, manifest, glory, and believe. So there's this connection here. Interestingly, the Eastern Church, they celebrate a festival called Epiphany. A lot of Protestant churches don't do this, but most Orthodox or Catholic churches do. And Epiphany combines several different touch points throughout the Bible. It celebrates the nativity of Jesus, the wise men coming, Jesus' baptism, and interestingly, the wedding at Cana is one of the things celebrated there. They had a manifestation. That's where that word is coming from. And it's the same word that we actually get our word epiphany from, the same root word. And so that's why they use that. But he manifested what? His glory. Yeah. This is an interesting word in the text. It has a lot of Old Testament roots. In the Old Testament, it's kabod. Kabod in the Old Testament, it has this idea, it's actually kind of the root word for the word weight or heavy, right? It's like God's weightiness or his heaviness when it says his glory. I want us to look at we're going to jump passages for a moment. So just pick one of the passages that I referenced for your group, and I want you to kind of read through it and go, how would we define God's glory based on this passage? So one of those is Exodus 24, 15 to 17. Exodus 24, 15 to 17. I have three passages you can choose from, so don't pick the first one. First one, Exodus 24, 15 to 17. Second one, Exodus 33, 18 to 23. Exodus 33, 18 to 23. Okay, third passage, if your group wants to do the third passage, 1 Kings 8, 10 to 11. 1 Kings 8, 10 to 11. I'll list all three again. So choose one for your group. Exodus 24, 15 to 17. Exodus 33, 18 to 23. Or 1 Kings 8, 10 to 11. And read that together and then talk about what do we understand of God's glory from these passages. Okay. Why don't you do 1 Kings 8, 10 to 11? 10 to 11. Okay, if you did the first passage, that would be Exodus 24. We're gonna go in order, okay? So whatever groups have done Exodus 24, if you'd like to kind of talk about that or answer the question for us, I'll go ahead and read it. It'll give you a chance to find the courage to raise your hand. Exodus 24, 15 to 17 says, Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And the seventh day he called out to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. All right, so if you're group one, what was your take on that? Did anybody do this one? I didn't assign these, I let you pick. That can always backfire. She asked me to read it again. I'll read it again. It says, Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord dwelt on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. And on the seventh, he called to Moses out of the midst of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. Any thoughts? Amber?
We just talked about it being like overwhelming, consuming, magnificent, to a devouring fire. Like imagine like a scary, like big, incredible.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, that's great. That word devouring fire, especially right now with the news that's going on, yeah, that's big, right? There's a weightiness there. Okay, for passage number 2, I'll read that. Exodus 33, 18 to 23. Moses said, please show me your glory. He's asking God to show him his glory. And he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you and will proclaim before you my name, the Lord. And I'll be gracious to whom I'll be gracious, and I'll show mercy on whom I'll show mercy. But he said, you cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live. And the Lord said, behold, there is a place by me where you shall stand on the rock. And when my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft of the rock, and I will cover you with my hand until I have passed by. And I will take away my hand, and you shall see my back, but my face shall not be seen. If you pick passage 2, you had the harder one. Raises all kind of questions. Any people for passage 2 here? Everybody picked passage 3, huh? Levi.
Yeah, we love this passage. We were looking at it. I think it reminds me of, I think it's in this area, but when God says, Moses going up on the mountain and don't even let your cattle or anybody even like touch the mountain, because that mountain, like if you touch it, you're going to die. You know, it talks about it in Hebrews. And so that just reminds me of God's power and kind of the seriousness of his presence, that like even touching the mountain that he's on would lead to your demise. Like it's pretty incredible. But as you were reading, I was thinking also that like God accommodates for Moses. I think that's really cool, that his power and his glory is so much so that if you even touch the mountain, you would die. But God, like the Lord makes a way for Moses still to like see his backside. He accommodates for Moses to be in his presence. And I think he does that today. But the fact that he has to accommodate, it just speaks to how powerful he is.
Yeah, it's good thoughts, Levi. Has there been any natural phenomenon that you've ever wanted to see live? Dan is raising his hand over here, right? Like, even with the fires on the other side of the state, there's been some of those fire tornadoes, which I've heard about, now there's video of. They look, just astounding. And there's a part of me that goes, man, it's like looking into a volcano. There's these certain natural wonders you got. I would just love to see that somehow, without dying, firsthand. And that's actually Moses' concern here, is like, I want to see you. And God's like, ooh, we got to be careful. Concession, I like that word. Dan.
Well, yeah, just the word glory is amazing. It seems to be the ultimate presence of God, his ultimate appearance, and we cannot see it through our sinful eyes. You have uniqueness of mankind made in the image of God, or an image of God. He was different than those animals made of their own kind. Man and woman are made in the image of God to reflect his glory to the rest of creation. So you have that. And of course, the passages we read, God's glory, his presence, unbelievable presence. And then Jesus finally is to show the glory of God as best as can be revealed to our five senses on planet Earth. We are to reflect that, for the wages of sin is death, for we have all fallen short of the glory of God, the glory he intended for us, or it can be translated, I guess, God's glory, perfection. And finally, in Revelation, we'll see him face to face. We'll finally see his glory. So it's kind of that thread from Genesis to Revelation is glory.
Yeah, these two passages from Exodus are fascinating because the Exodus story starts out with the people in captivity in Egypt, and God has chosen Moses. He's had his own epiphany, if you will, seeing God in a burning bush. God speaks to him. He declares who he is. I am that I am. All of those things. And as they are being led out from many signs and wonders, they're being led out. The initial invitation is, all of you, come join me on Mount Sinai. They were all supposed to go there. And there's one little passage, a tiny little verse, just crammed right there in the middle, that says they were afraid and didn't want to go. And then invitation number 2 is, okay, now there's a boundary rock around the mountain. If you cross this line, you're dead, except for Moses and climbing party. You may come up and experience what I had invited everyone to do. And so the invitation and covenant proposal number 1 was, you come join me, all of you, and I will make of you a kingdom of priests. They were all going to be priests. And then proposition number 2 is, okay, only Moses come, and now you will be a nation with priests, not a kingdom of priests. And so there's some fascinating nuances if you just kind of compare the various invitations that God gives to the people and how the covenant changes from iteration number 1 to what we have finally by the end of Exodus. But flowing through this is his glory, which is terrifying. I said quite emphatically a sermon or 2 ago, people who go on gushing about visions of heaven and God and all this kind of stuff, if they don't express terror, I know one thing about their story. And that's based on verses like this, where it's described as terrifying, as dangerous, as devouring. These are not things you would just, I imagine if we were to interview the firefighters on the other side of the state, they wouldn't be things like, oh, it was awesome. You should have been there. It was amazing. I mean, beautiful everywhere. I mean, I bet they probably look a little shell-shocked right now. Yeah, like I bet they've seen some things that it's going to take them a while to work through. And I have that sense. I mean, there's one of the times where Moses comes down after seeing God, and they basically put a veil over him. Like he's radiating God's glory. We don't know what that looked like. He shone with light, but they were terrified of Moses, who had been in God's presence. And so even secondhand terror is a real thing when it comes to God's glory. That'd be a great song title for a worship song, Secondhand Terror. Okay. 70% of your hands better go up. This is passage number 3, okay? So I know you all chose this one. 1 Kings 8:10-11 says, and when priests came out of the holy place, this is right after Solomon has built the temple, they've commissioned it, and they brought the ark in, okay? When priests came out of the holy place, a cloud filled the house of the Lord so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord. Okay, who wants to chat about that one? It's a good one.
First off, I love that the glory of the Lord is tangible, that it filled the place. So it had substance to it. It's not, see-through. It's definitely there. Mm-hmm. And that it is more awesome than even the specialized priests who they were consecrated and set aside for that service in the temple and had done everything that was required to serve in the temple and to go into what will be the Holy of Holies. And yet they could not stand, they could not perform because the Lord was so awesome and with his presence filling that place. You just had to stand there gobsmacked. I don't know what else to say. They were just overwhelmed as that the Lord's presence was there.
Yeah. Yeah, imagine a Sunday where everyone came prepared, right? And pastor gets moved off stage by God's glory, and the worship team gets moved off stage by God's glory, and all the Sunday school teachers everyone's kind of pushed out into the parking lot. I mean, it sounds like the building's on fire, right? Like we all just have to move out of the way for God's glory. But that is sometimes we think so much about our faith and our practice being performative. I came to do this because God needs me to do this, and so I am, he called, I answered, I need to go do this thing for him. And I think when God's glory shows up, the only answer is we get out of the way, and what else can we do? We let it happen. And I mean, that should really be our prayer. Oh, that your glory would fill this place. Right? It's not about, oh, let me do a great job. Oh, let me perform the thing that I practice and came to perform. It's not a performative element to our faith as New Testament believers. It should be this hopeful expectation that God's glory fills this place in a way that we are moved. That would be awesome. Habakkuk 2:14 says, for the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea. It's amazing. There's a missional impact to God's glory. We could look at Revelation where it talks about his glory, his enthroned glory. And what does that look like? So God's glory is throughout all of the scriptures. And here we see in this simple story that's kind of happening with a wink and a nod between mother and son. And Jesus is sort of saying, come on, not yet. And she says, all right, guys, do what he says. All of a sudden, there's this revelation of God's glory. There's this manifestation, an epiphany. They were able to see for a brief second, kind of just like peeking through the curtains. They just got a slight glimpse of God's glory showing up, overriding one of their ancient traditions, which had its place in its time, but now something new is here. God's glory is here. It's shown up. Okay, so John 2:11 says, this is the first of his signs that Jesus did in Cana in Galilee and manifested his glory, and the disciples believed in him. So I want you to chat about with your group, what is the connection between signs and manifested glory and belief? There's signs, glory, and belief. Those three things John wraps up together, A and then B and then C, belief happens. What do you see there? Okay, what do you think? What are your answers? What's the connection between these three? All right. I need a bell. All right, attempt number 2. What do you see? Somebody raise your hand. Tell us, what does your group think about the connection between these three? Sounds like some good conversations, though. Tim?
Well, so the signs and the manifestation of God's glory obviously drives some level of faith. The people of Israel fell on their faces. You know, the disciples put their faith in Jesus. But it seems like that's not a permanent thing. We know the Israelites still struggled with following God. And we know that I guess it's both sides of the coin. We can not see powerful signs and yet still have faith and be transformed. And so I think it's an awesome gift that God can give to reveal himself to us, but it's not necessary. I guess I'd go that side of it.
Yeah, the scripture, he even says that in the Gospels, if you believe because you saw the sign, blessed are those who don't see the sign and still believe.
I think, too, remember, these were baby disciples.
Yeah.
They had just been called, like yesterday almost. And so they stepped into following Jesus and knowing they needed to respond to him. And then you start thinking, what have I done? You know, who is this guy? We've given up everything. And then here they are to experience that. And I think it was the wrapping of the bow on their callings, that they could see they had made the right decision, that this man was God.
Yeah. Tim, I think you're right. Like, it's awesome when God shows a sign or a wonder. And a lot of our experience as modern believers is looking to the record of his signs and wonders, which for me is enough. I believe the stories from Exodus. I believe the stories throughout the Bible. And I am equally as amazed, maybe more amazed than some of them were, because some saw the sign and doubted. At the same time, I think there's something else there.
I have no theological background.
Can you hold the mic a little closer?
I have no theological background like a lot of you, but from my perspective, God knows people better than they know themselves. And God knows what they need. And some people need to see and experience, but not everybody does. So he was in a group, and that's just from my heart, because many times we want to see, we don't get to see. But I think of Thomas, and he had to see, he had to touch, he had to feel. And Jesus knew that and respected that and gave him what he needed to believe.
Yeah. I think there's a place for apologetics. There's a place for well-reasoned arguments and logical statements. There's a place for, Jude says, contend for the gospel, right? Wrestle for it, fight for it. There's a place for these things. But sometimes all our hope are in those tools. And I would argue maybe our minds need to be kind of bent back the other way for a little bit and just go, what's the place of prayer and begging God in someone's conversion? Right? Because like sometimes I can see the words I'm saying and I know they're true. I can hear the argument. I know it's a good argument, but it's just bouncing off. And they're not mad at me. It's not an aggressive thing. It's just not registering. The light is not going on, and there's nothing that I can say in my flesh to flip that light switch on in them. My prayer is this right here: God, you have to reveal yourself to this person. It's clearly not a logical, someone needs to break it down and explain it to me kind of problem. It's the kind of problem where they need to see you. And I don't think that's wrong for us to pray. If you've got a loved one a neighbor, a coworker that you've been sharing with or hope to share with or don't know how to share with, the starting, middle, and ending point can always be God. You have to step in and do something. And go through the pages of Acts so many times, not so many times, all of the time, the Holy Spirit was there first, already at work when the apostles showed up. And so I think we have to kind of reframe some of our approach. Is salvation is not this, we're bringing this to you. It's more God has brought us to you, and God has revealed himself to you. And that is the necessary component for people to believe. We don't have time. I'm going to cut one question discussion because I want to end on a different question. So I'll just kind of ask and answer this question. So why the wine, right? It's water into wine. What's the big deal with wine? Why is that the special moment where somebody goes, oh, wait, I see him for who he is? I'm going to read from Hosea 2:21 and 23. Hosea 2:21, 23 says, and in that day I will answer, declares the Lord. I will answer the heavens, and they shall answer the earth, and the earth shall answer again. The wine and the oil, and they shall answer Jezreel, and I will sow her for myself in the land, and I will have mercy on no mercy. I will say to not my people, you are my people, and he shall say, you are my God. Hosea is this big drama where he has to marry a woman of ill reputation and have children with her, and he names one child, not my child, and it's this whole drama that's played out. And here, there's this revelation of one day, the people that I've called not my people and the people that I've called no mercy, I'm going to change those names to I do have mercy. You are my people. What's in the middle of this? The earth flowing with wine and oil. Interesting. Amos 9:13 to 14. Amos 9:13 to 14 says, behold, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when the plowman shall overtake the reaper, and the treader of grapes, him who sows the seed. The mountains shall drip sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with it. I will restore the fortunes of my people Israel. They shall rebuild the ruined cities and inhabit them. They shall plant vineyards and drink their wine, and they shall make gardens and eat their fruit. This is a time when God's people are being judged. And if you think of farming, you always think we need this side to balance that side, right? Whatever we're putting in needs to balance what we're taking out. And we can't have something go too fast. And here he's saying, look, the people who are doing the plowing and the sowing, they're going to overtake the reapers, right? The need, the demand, the supply, the abundance is going to be so great that explorative farming becomes the norm. What's at the middle of this? There's going to be wine. There's going to be gardens. They're going to be able to take the time to make and build, more importantly, to enjoy in safety these things. It's a promise of their future return. And so all of these themes that regard wine and new creation, and there's so many more in Scripture, these are just two of them, all of these themes are kind of wrapped through this story where someone who called you out of your fishing camp to come follow him, as Beth said, you just baby disciples, tadpole disciples, they're looking at him take some sacred jars, do something else. There's new wine, and you can just kind of see them go, wait a second, we just saw something amazing. Maybe this is a little bit of a different thing that we're about to experience. So very practically speaking, Jesus helps Mary out of a socially awkward engagement, right? There's a problem, very practical problem. We don't have wine, we need wine. Jesus, make wine. And Jesus uses this moment not just to make wine, but to create a sign that gives them a manifestation of his glory that leads them to believe, right? There's those things. So it's a very practical problem that led to people believing because they saw how God acted. Now, I want you to chat about with your group, what is a practical problem that you have in your life that you need Jesus to be part of? A lot of times we think about the gospel, I think about my salvation, right? I'm a sinner. I need Jesus to pay for my sins, to pay my debt so that I can be in right relationship with God. And that is a true thing. But I also need the gospel every day. I need Jesus every day, right? Every time I have a broken relationship, every time I have a problem I can't overcome, a sin I can't conquer, something that I can't fix, I still need Jesus. And those are all those constant reminders, this kind of just tapping from the outside going, you need Jesus today. It's not a one and done. It's you need him every day. So talk with that person sitting next to you. What's a practical problem that you have? And I want to invite you to take a moment and just pray for each other. We'll take maybe 5 minutes here. And then Steve will just, when he starts playing and he'll bring us back with song, he'll close us out that way.